Tonight on Ukraine Today, Ukrainian strikes, Ukraine's defense forces burned down 2 Russian amphibious aircraft and a Mi-8 helicopter, and also hit the occupiers' logistics hub and ammo depot. Russian provocations, Nato scrambled Eurofighter jets over the Baltic Sea because of a Russian spy plane. Week of diplomacy. What will President Zelensky discuss with his American counterpart Donald Trump and with European leaders? Double standards in global politics. Canada, Australia, the United Kingdom and Portugal recognize the state of Palestine. All this and more, right now. Hello, my name is Volodymyr Robchun. Subscribe, hit that like button and let's get to the news. For the first time ever, drones of Ukraine's military intelligence burned down 2 Russian amphibious planes. They carried expensive equipment to detect and fight submarines. In addition, a Mi-8 helicopter was destroyed in temporarily occupied Crimea. Yesterday, reports came in about powerful explosions on the Ukrainian peninsula, possibly even a strike on high-ranking Russian officials. But this information still needs to be confirmed. What is already confirmed: a strike on the enemy's logistics hub and ammo depot in the temporarily occupied part of Luhansk region. Large stockpiles of strike drones and supporting equipment, tens of thousands of mines, grenades and cartridges of different types, plus artillery shells were destroyed. More on what's happening at and around the front line in the report.
The Ukrainian counteroffensive continues. The armed forces of Ukraine managed to divert the attention of the advanced assault groups away from Pokrovsk. Ukrainian military intelligence HUR in Crimea hit Russian helicopters and a radar station. Near Kherson, assault groups on boats were destroyed, and investigators confirmed the deaths of more than 12 Russian officers as a result of a sabotage operation. Everything happening on the front today, watch it right now. In just a few days, the scale has doubled. The Ukrainian counteroffensive in the Donetsk region continues. According to President Zelensky, 330 square kilometers of territory near Dobropilya and in the Pokrovsk area have been returned to the control of the armed forces of Ukraine. Of these, more than 170 have already been completely liberated from Russian troops.
It was specifically in Pokrovsk that Ukrainian defense forces successfully and efficiently deoccupied Novoekonomichne. This represents a significant improvement in the tactical successes of the Ukrainian defense forces, who have effectively prevented the occupiers from achieving tactical gains and eliminated the threat of an operational encirclement.
In turn, the strikes by the Ukrainian armed forces have made it possible to speak of the encirclement of the Russian group, which, instead of the expected blitzkrieg, has already suffered more than 2,500 personnel losses on this section of the front alone.
If we look at the map, a strike has been delivered almost at the base of the Russian incursion into Ukrainian defenses. In other words, there is now a threat of operational encirclement of the Russian occupation forces in this direction.
According to experts, it is in this direction that Russian forces will concentrate their main efforts in the near future. To hold their positions, the 61st Russian Naval Infantry Brigade was redeployed to the region, along with most of the combat-ready units from the entire front line.
Russian special forces have also appeared in Dobropilya, elite units whose sole task, once again, is to break through to those troops that have found themselves, let's say, showing signs of encirclement, which are indeed present today. This is very important. The reserves that the Russians had planned to use for completely different purposes are now being thrown in to break through to the Russian troops in Dobropilya.
At the same time, it seems likely that the Russian command still does not fully grasp the scale of their failure on the Donetsk front. President Zelensky said that the enemy maps captured during the counteroffensive in Donetsk show that the Russians are simply lying to their leadership and not reporting the real situation on the battlefield. Because of this, among other reasons, they are not receiving the necessary resources, unlike the Ukrainian armed forces.
This counteroffensive operation continues thanks to the efforts of the 1st Corps of the National Guard Azov, thanks to our assault troops, assault forces and other dedicated units. And these counterattacking actions, the counteroffensive actions of our defense forces, have led to the fact that today we can say that 160 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory have been liberated. I can't recall, throughout this year or the previous one, that such large areas have been liberated.
Clearly inspired by the successes of our assault units, the General Staff Command decided to designate such groups as a separate branch of the military, which will allow for specialized, intensified training focused specifically on storming enemy positions. The corresponding changes are expected to take place by the end of the month.
It is necessary to combine both defense and, accordingly, attacks, as well as conducting effective operations in the enemy's rear and on their flanks. Such a combination, I think, will logically unite the efforts of these troops, and they will become, so to speak, a single branch of our armed forces. And of course, these are the tasks they carry out. I still see this as the active part of our armed forces, capable of carrying out operations in the most difficult areas. This includes strikes against the enemy, containing breakthroughs by specially trained units, and attacks on those enemy units that are breaking through, that are forming pincers, as we say, these claws that come in from the right and left, for example, around a specific city. Such troops should be the ones to contain them.
Another point on the front where the Russians are currently especially active remains Kupiansk. According to Russian media, almost half the city has already been occupied. However, it is reliably known only that fighting is taking place on the outskirts of the settlement.
It is still too early to make predictions about how the situation will develop further, since a direct assault on a city always takes a long time. So far, the situation does not appear critical for the Ukrainian army, according to a CIT analyst. Let's see if the redeployment of the 3rd Assault Brigade, which previously acted as a rapid response team, will help.
At the same time, the defense forces are also showing good results in other directions. For example, just recently, the GUR reported that drone strikes in Crimea allowed fighters to hit 3 Russian Mi-8 multi-purpose helicopters at once, as well as significantly damage the multi-million-dollar Nebo radar station. Drone operators from the 40th Coast Guard Brigade near Kherson also made their mark. They detected Russian assault troops on boats. It's not hard to guess what happened next. At the same time, our command reports that Russian UAV specialists also took a hit from Ukrainian drones the day before. That much-hyped Rubicon, which is supposedly the best at training occupiers to work with drones, is temporarily ceasing operations.
It's one of the most combat-ready units, plus it's also heavily promoted in the media. New tech, new technologies, drones that, well, we're all supposed to be terrified of and run from. So Rubicon got hit. Some very interesting things hit them as well. Most likely, these were middle strike class attack UAVs.
And finally, investigators were able to confirm the rumors from 2 weeks ago about the elimination of Russian officers in the Zaporizhzhia region. The liquidation did in fact take place. The names have been identified. The officers really did die on the spot.
In the area of the village of Voskresenka, in the Zaporizhzhia region, which was occupied as a result of a successful joint operation by the GIOR and the Mariupol resistance, the Russian command post 35A was completely burned down. 17 officers and 1 enlisted soldier were killed. The officers were in charge of the offensive on one of the sectors in the Zaporizhzhia direction. Now there will be no offensive. I Want to Live published a list of the deceased by name and clarified that on August 30th, unknown individuals allegedly set dry grass on fire near the command post of the 35th Army. The fire quickly spread to the buildings and dugouts of the command post. Due to the smoke and the command post filling with carbon monoxide, the staff on duty at headquarters were unable to escape.
At the same time, apparently after such news, the failures of the Russian army have also affected Russian mobilization. Thus, the Center for Countering Disinformation stated that, for the first time, losses in the occupiers' army have exceeded the number of people willing to sign a contract and go to war.
Ukraine is fighting for freedom. Support independent Ukrainian journalism so we can keep telling the truth about Russia's war. Click the link in the description to become our sponsor. And now is the time to subscribe, like this video and share it so more people can see it. Thank you and glory to Ukraine. In the past 24 hours, Russia lost at least 960 occupiers killed and wounded. Since the start of the full-scale invasion, that's already 1,102,570 invaders. Also, in the last day, Ukraine's defense forces destroyed 1 Russian tank, 1 armored vehicle, 37 artillery systems and dozens of other pieces of enemy equipment. Meanwhile, contract soldiers in the Russian army are getting fewer. In the second quarter of this year, less than 38,000 people wanted to earn money on the war. That does not cover the level of losses. Details ahead.
Every Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
The Kremlin has finally started to drown in the war in Ukraine. For the first time since the start of the full-scale invasion, losses in the Russian army have exceeded the number of people willing to sign a contract with the Ministry of Defense. The rate of recruiting contract soldiers is several times lower than the number of those killed at the front. The Ukrainian Center for Countering Disinformation asserts that the situation across the border is turning extremely negative for Putin.
In the second quarter of 2025, only 37.9 thousand people signed a contract with the Russian Ministry of Defense. This is the lowest figure in the past 2 years and 2.5 times less than during the same period last year. Andriy Kovalenko, head of the Ukrainian Center for Countering Disinformation.
Russia also no longer has enough contract soldiers to even cover its losses at the front. The Ukrainian Center for Countering Disinformation emphasizes that in recent months, the average daily number of deaths and injuries in the Russian army has exceeded 1,000 people. At the same time, according to the General Staff, Russia's losses in this war have already surpassed 1,100,000 soldiers.
There are already not always enough contract soldiers to cover the Russian army's weekly irrecoverable losses. Andriy Kovalenko, head of the Ukrainian Center for Countering Disinformation.
It seems there are fewer and fewer fools willing to join Putin's army. Even the most die-hard Z-patriots understand perfectly well that this road is one way only. In most Russian cities, cemeteries are overflowing with fresh graves of occupiers who perished in Ukraine. There's nowhere left to bury the Cargo 200. There is a catastrophic shortage of places for coffins returning from the front.
See, these are the cemetery gates. Guys, they're still burying people outside the cemetery gates. They've started some kind of tree trimming here, but everything here is just as it was before. They also keep burying people in this swamp. It's filled with loose soil, and underneath there are groundwater levels.
After seeing all this, no one wants to sign a contract with the Russian Ministry of Defense. Even millions of rubles, which are huge sums by the standards of rural Russia, for joining the ranks of the occupying army no longer work. In the fourth year of the war, no one is rushing to line up at Russian military recruitment offices anymore. As a result, instead of the best, the Russian army is now taking the best of the worst.
Military recruitment offices have to meet their quotas. So if they don't see some medical documents or don't want to see them, they kind of
They declare everyone fit service.
yes, they overstate the fitness category.
To make up for the shortage of cannon fodder at the front, Russian drug addicts, people with HIV, tuberculosis patients, and all kinds of marginalized individuals are being sent to the front in droves. Some citizens in Russia have built entire businesses around them.
A payment of 40,000 rubles for recruiting to the war has been offered in the Irkutsk region, reports People of Baikal. As the administration of Usolye Sibirskoye told a local resident, you can receive the money if you convince a citizen who doubts, if you help them make up their mind. It is not necessary to come to the military enlistment office with the volunteer, a local administration employee clarified. It is enough for the future soldier when signing the contract to write 2 statements and indicate who convinced him to come. Within 7 days, this social payment will be credited to their account as it is for volunteers.
However, Russian recruiters complain that it is hard to persuade anyone to sign a contract and drag them into the enlistment office, especially when at the entrance you are met by dozens or even hundreds of already wounded soldiers begging the state for the assistance promised by Putin for their injuries.
They say on TV that they help the wounded, that they help with everything, but in reality no one does anything, and you just go from one corridor to another knocking on different doors, and it's all pointless.
All of this completely kills any desire among Russians to go to the front. As a result, military commissars have to resort to using force, intimidation, and threats against potential recruits.
Very often, unfortunately, we frequently and regrettably use forceful measures when conscripting young draftees into service. Sorry for the tautology, but it accurately reflects the situation.
But even under the threat of prison or torture, which has recently become a common practice in Russian military enlistment offices, fewer and fewer people can be broken and forced to sign a contract with the army. Analysts say that soon the Putin army will simply choke. With each passing day, it becomes harder and harder for the Kremlin to make up for losses at the front. As a result, in some areas, the enemy has practically left their flanks exposed. experts say that this is exactly what the Ukrainian armed forces may take advantage of in the near future. Meanwhile, the military has already announced a major counteroffensive by the armed forces of Ukraine.
Ukraine's air defense forces shut down 132 out of 141 drones launched by Putin's terrorists last night against peaceful Ukrainian cities and towns. Still, 9 strike drones hit 7 locations and debris fell in 8 more places. Also this morning, the Russians dropped guided bombs on Zaporizhia. Residential buildings were damaged. Sadly, there are dead and wounded. In the Kiev region, occupiers hit apartment building and private houses. A 32-year-old man was injured. One person was wounded in Sumy. 2 Russian strikes hit industrial facilities and another one an educational institution. Massive shelling of Ukraine, Russian intrusion into Nato airspace and other signs of aggression will be discussed this week in different formats. Here's what President Volodymyr Zelensky said.
Much can be done if our partners will hear us and support proposals that truly bring the end of the war closer. There will be the week of the UN General Assembly, different events, different meetings. Already in the schedule are almost 24 meetings with leaders of different countries, from all parts of the world, with all who have long supported Ukraine and with those who are among our new partners.
By the way, judging by Zelensky's words, his meeting with the US President Donald Trump is happening this week.
We also plan this week a meeting with the President of the United States of America. There will be an important event about returning Ukrainian children who were abducted by Russia. A truly global summit on this issue. It is important that this week adds to the world's readiness for strong action. Without strength, peace will not prevail.
Long time no Russian provocations. Just kidding. Yesterday, Nato scrambled Eurofighter jets because of a Russian spy plane over the Baltic Sea. Western media report that the plane did not respond to calls. Do you think the Kremlin will stop here, or should the alliance prepare for another Russian attack? Reminder, on September 19th, Russian fighter jets violated Estonia's airspace. Before that, they attacked Poland with drones. But don't worry, according to Donald Trump, the US will help protect Poland and the Baltic states if Russia continues its escalation. The president said this during a short talk with reporters. And I imagine how Trump could help. First, 2 weeks to think, then words that escalation might have happened by mistake. The leaders of Poland and the Baltics will be invited to the White House, where Vice President J.D. Vance will ask them why they don't say thank you for words of concern and support. Later, Trump will say NATO's Article 5 has long needed changes and propose that countries under Russian attack should buy the best American weapons. What do you think about that scenario? Meanwhile, Ukraine expressed its wish to take part in the UN Security Council meeting about Russian jets over Estonia. Kyiv wants to share its view of the incident. Will the meeting also raise the question of shooting Russian planes down? So that next time, and something tells me there will be a next time, when Russian jets fly illegally over Estonia or any other sane country, 12 minutes or less would be enough for their totally legal destruction. And now, breaking news, a sensation! The Kremlin is supplying weapons to the Italian mafia. Full story in the report.
Rifles are hidden in barrels of oil, Kalashnikov assault rifles without serial numbers, modern ammunition freshly off the assembly lines of state-owned arms factories. All of this is not just a story from the crime pages, but part of a carefully constructed scheme orchestrated by Russia. According to an investigation by the Italian publication L'Inchiesta, Moscow is centrally supplying weapons to mafia clans, turning Europe's organized crime into a tool of its geopolitical strategy.
I believe that this is not just about complicity, but about full awareness and political will on the part of the Russian authorities. As we mentioned, the weapons seized in Italy have no serial numbers. This means they leave the factories already unmarked. And this is only possible by political order, because having a serial number means the weapon can be identified. It allows you to determine the time of manufacture and the customer. By removing the serial number, they strip the weapon of its passport before releasing it onto the market.
The supply routes pass through Sicilian ports and the northeastern border of Italy. In Catania, in the districts of San Giovanni, Galermo and Librino, there are hideouts where new weapons are regularly delivered. According to insider information, on Sicily, automatic rifles and carbines are hidden in barrels of oil. This method not only conceals the smuggling but also prevents corrosion. In the northeast of the country, in Friuli Venezia Giulia, they illegally transport goods using trucks and cars with double bottoms, which are also used to carry drone components.
In fact, the routes mostly coincide with those used for transporting fuel, oil and other goods by the Shadow Fleet. Tracking the routes of illegal oil and illegal migration helps to reconstruct the routes of weapons from Russia to Italy and other European countries. We were able to identify this in Italy, but it's clear that weapons are also ending up in other European countries.
What is especially alarming is that mafia clans are forbidden from selling off all the weapons at once. A significant portion is kept in hiding places as a strategic reserve. The main source of these supplies is, in particular, the Tula arms plant. Europol confirmed this in its 2023 analysis. The appearance of new unmarked weapons on the market indicates the involvement of parastatal structures in supplying illegal trade. For example, in March 2022, just a few days after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine began, Italian police discovered an arsenal in Catania linked to the Nisa group of the Santa Paola Ercolano clan. 9 brand-new Kalashnikov assault rifles, hundreds of rounds of ammunition and sniper rifles in perfect condition. The districts of San Giobba, Nigalerma and Librino have turned into hidden warehouses with a constant replenishment of arsenals.
Russia supplies not only the Italian mafia, but also many African regimes with weapons. Russia also supports rebels, so-called rebels, though now they are no longer rebels, but fighters against the authorities, even in Latin American countries. All of this is done to destabilize the situation in various regions. This also comprehensively includes substantial support for all kinds of various right-wing organizations operating within European countries through direct financial funding. Furthermore, this also encompasses significant support for organized crime syndicates, specifically the mafia, and for all sorts of aggressive hooligan football organizations, which are additionally supported through various clandestine means and direct financial contributions. Various public organizations that are financed by Russian oligarchs. In other words, any and every method of political destabilization that can be effectively activated within the European Union, Russia actively employs and vigorously supports.
A member of the Italian Parliament, Alberta Lasaka, has already responded to the newspaper's publication. She appealed to the country's Minister of Internal Affairs, demanding an urgent explanation regarding the situation with the smuggling of Russian weapons.
The picture painted by the journalistic investigation is alarming. The weapons being sold to criminals are reportedly manufactured at the main, most important state-owned arms factory where everything happens under your terms, under the direct control of government authorities in Moscow. Another alarming aspect is that, at the seller's request, criminal organizations are allegedly storing part of the military equipment in our country. A stockpile of weapons under Russia's control intended for purposes that clearly go beyond the mafia and illegal trafficking.
This is a significant political move that Russia clearly needs to strengthen its own negotiating position in crucial talks with the powerful European Union, the United States of America, and various other influential countries. This is a full-fledged struggle for power in the world. In other words, this is about defending their own positions. This is Russia standing its ground. This is the way it defends itself. Its interests in the world, its interests in Europe.
Italy is just one point on the map. Such weapons depots can at any moment become a lever of pressure for Moscow on all of Europe, turning criminal routes into a tool of geopolitical influence and a strategic threat.
Finally, about double standards in world politics. Canada, Australia, the United Kingdom and Portugal recognize the state of Palestine. They claim it was done to bring peace closer. But in fact, the terrorist group Hamas, which rules Gaza, just got a reward for the mega attack on October 7th, 2023, and for its earlier terrorism. It turns out the murder of innocent Israeli children, the rape of women, burning people alive, kidnapping Israelis and citizens of other countries, all of that led to Western countries recognizing Palestine. The big question is, in which borders? With what kind of government? This is like lifting sanctions from Russia while it keeps killing Ukrainians, destroying cities, making up fake history and trying to deceive the world. That's what double standards look like. And with hope that light will win, I wish a happy Rosh Hashanah to everyone celebrating. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Thank you for your support. Strength to Ukraine's defenders. Glory to Ukraine. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment and share. See you next time.